Hi, it's Kyley.
And it's Eva.
Welcome to 100 episodes.
100 episodes, bitches.
I'm already
We
crying, Eva.
Welcome to our 100th episode. Kyley and I have been pretty excited for this moment, leading up to it because it feels like a big deal to us.
Yeah, I just am so, I feel real every time I tune into it today to think about we're going to record. I just feel really emotional. I think the strongest emotion for me is just so much gratitude, such a deep, and we're going to talk about all sorts of things about how this means for us. But I just in this moment feel stupendous amounts of gratitude for you. Holy shit, you're just the wisest, most interesting and compassionate person that I know. And I get to talk to you every week for hours, and
Kyley,
overwhelming gratitude that you all out there listen to our show and send us your comments and are part of this with us. Holy shit, that's the coolest thing ever, that we get to just hang out and pal around and change each other's lives, and then you listen to us. What a generous act that you are helping us make something really beautiful. So yeah, I just love you all. I'm gonna be sappy schmuck the entire time we record this episode.
Yeah, I want to just add to that, because this, I don't know if it comes across. I hope that it does. Some people have said that it does, but this is a very intimate experience for you and I. And the fact that then people can tune in, I feel like I'm sharing some space intimately with people who choose to be with us. It's mind boggling. It's humbling and it's amazing. And it's this is such an intimate, it feels like a very intimate experience for me anyway. I'm sure it does for you too. And then that other people will join us on this adventure. There are no words. There are no words to capture that feeling. So, yeah.
And I think what's really cool is 100 episodes in, and you and I, the thing we say to other people and each other is just how important of a project this is, in a world where we both have our own businesses and we both do a million different things and have there was one point, I forget exactly when, but there was one point where you were having a conversation about priorities, and you said something very generous. You're I know you have kids and all the stuff going on in your business, and I was oh no, this is this is tippity top priority, because it just brings me such a stupendous amount of joy. That's the second time I've used the word stupendous, and we're 4 minutes in. So
good. That means we're in
breaking
a
up
good place.
Scrabble words, guys.
Yeah, I agree. It's top of the list. One of my favorite creations. Probably, maybe I'm of all time. Not even just my career. I don't know, of all time. I kind of feel like I was made. Well, I mean, here's the truth. I love to fucking talk. So I've been doing this, for 38 years now, and so I feel like I'm made to talk. And I'm so grateful also just for the opportunity to have my passions and my gifts align, and to align in this way, to be able to do something that you really care about, which is something that I wanted to spend some time talking about in this podcast today, not just so listeners can hear us gush about how much so that we love this, but I think what we want to impart upon other people as well is provide some inspiration and maybe momentum for going out there and doing the damn thing that you love, and how to keep that, how to actually do it though, how to keep it, how to do it and not burn out and get overwhelmed and get in your own way and all that stuff.
Let's start there. Okay. Yes, okay. Let's start there. I also want to ask you something. Well, I want to at our dinner table every night, we ask what your favorite thing from the day was. Mm-hmm. And I want to ask what one of your favorite things about the show is, whether it's a singular moment or just something that we experience repeatedly. So
okay, I'll have to think on that. I'll subconsciously
that's why I'm giving it to you now.
I'll warm up. Oh, that's gonna be hard to answer. Okay.
I know.
Oh, okay. we said, oh fuck, I didn't even, now I'm like, I wish we had time to prepare. I don't know if you remembered when we realized we were going to have our 100th episode, another question we said we wanted to ask ourselves was, what does spirituality mean to you? And how does it show up in your everyday life? And both of us are like, damn it, because the truth is that's such a hard question to answer. Even though for the past 100 episodes, we've had all of our guests answered it, we've been able to skirt.
We did answer it once in the very beginning.
We answered it once, yeah. But for the most part, I'm like, oh, I'm glad I don't have to answer that question because it's a hard question. But I do think, I mean, does that still feel?
Yeah, we should like, probably.
Well, because we're about to retire that question.
Yes, exactly.
We're moving on to a new question. And so I think there is something nice about starting
yes,
and then ending,
honoring it.
Yes. Yeah, and coming back full circle. So maybe we'll keep that to the end as well. Yes. Stuff that we can think about.
I like that I like we've got an agenda. This is new territory for us.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that I love what you're saying about like holding space, about like permission to do the damn thing. And the thing that I think is funny that I keep thinking about today is like, I remember where I was when we first started emailing about doing this podcast, because we had been like sporadically in touch, you know what I mean? Like every couple months or so it'd be like, hey friend, how are you?
Yeah, I want to kind of give people background for how the podcast started in case they haven't started from the beginning. So I think you're on the right track.
We were just out of the blue, we kind of started messaging each other, and each one of us independently have been like, I kind of have this idea, like I want to do a podcast about spirituality, and yeah, I just remember I was at the pool with my kids and like just like checked my email and was like, oh, Eva wants to do a podcast. Would you do a podcast with me? Do we want to do the same podcast? Like I got like so like excited with that kind of like nervous, not nervous, but just like that kind of like, you know, like, is this a thing? Could this be a thing?
Well, because, okay, I also, for more context, I think we were both in different places in our lives as well. And so the way that I remember it actually was that we hadn't actually been in touch in a long time. So you emailed me out of the blue because I think you were like getting into Akashic record reading. Yeah. And you were just kind of reaching out to say, hey, like, since we've last been in touch, like I've been delving into this whole new world of stuff. And you were just kind of like reaching out to connect, which, let me just say, in and of itself is like that would have never we would not have done this podcast if you didn't reach out to me.
Oh, wow.
That it would have not happened, because I'm not a reacher outer. I mean, and I'm learning to be more, because I actually think that's a really valuable skill. And I think community is like super important. I think there's something very like worthwhile about just like putting yourself out there and connecting with people. And so you didn't have the intention for a podcast. You're just like, hey, I'm into this thing. And also you did say the word podcast in your email. You're like, and also I've been thinking about starting a podcast. Like it was just one of the many ideas that you had, because you're Kyley. So, you know, you always have like a million ideas. Right. And that was the one that caught my attention, because I simultaneously was also like, I want to do a podcast. So that was the thing that I specifically responded to, where I was like, oh, you want to do a podcast? I also want to do it. And I think I like pitched you the idea of like, hey, how do you feel about doing a podcast together?
This is really funny, because I have a story that I'm bad at being in touch with people. And so this is really funny that I forgot this part of our origin story for the show. And also like, it's just very helpful for the part of me who's like, oh, Kyley sucks at keeping in touch with people and is not a good communicator, that you're like, the whole show doesn't exist if you don't.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because I think you're a very good networker. Like, I don't even think you would call it networking. I think you're just being a genuine person who's reaching out. But I think that is like an actual skill that you have.
Yeah, I guess that is true, because I do have a lot.
But you're not like, what's nice about it is like, how you know it's a gift is that it's not like you don't even think about it. You know,
there's no effort. It's just
to you. You're not like
ball. Yeah,
exactly. You're not like, oh, I'm gonna intentionally network. You're just like, oh, I'm thinking about this person and I have this idea and I want to connect.
Yes, and I think it's just also one of the ways that my intuition shows up. Like the other day, I was thinking about a friend. I like woke up thinking about a friend, and then like 2 hours later, I got a message from her. So like at this point in my life, like even back then, like when I think of someone a lot, I feel like it's an invitation to be like,
Mm,
you should act on this.
yeah. Yeah.
Whether that act on is just like, sending them a text or a phone call, or,
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
always result in a podcast, but sometimes it's just like, oh, I've been thinking about you too,
Uh-huh.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that. Yeah. And then so that's when, and then we got on the phone.
Yes.
And again, friends, this is all pretty new. Kyley and I had never met in person.
That's
Like we had
right.
never met in person. This was an
Yeah.
internet connection.
Yeah.
And we were like, hey, why don't we just like jump on the phone? We just like shot around some
Yeah.
ideas. And I do think that we were very, very, very fortunate. I will say, like, that we have, like, the reason this podcast works, honestly, is because it's a serious complement of skills. Like, we
Mm,
fill in each other's gaps.
yes.
And I don't think I could do this podcast alone. Actually,
Oh,
I'm pretty sure I could.
I know for sure. This is, if I tried to do it on my own, it would be one audio file that sat on my computer forever. Like um, yeah, that absolutely doesn't exist without being in partnership. And I was also thinking about today, like skills wise, we complement each other really well, but also I love that we don't have the same perspective about spirituality. We have like,
Mm.
there's like an overlap,
Yeah, that's a Venn
and there's a
diagram.
huge amount of like curiosity and respect for each other's kind of like practice and way of moving through things, but we don't see things the same. And I think
Mhm.
that's like, I mean, I'm bored of myself, right? Like,
Totally. I totally
like
get it. Yeah.
I love so much when you know, I don't know, it just feels way more fun to come and hash things out with you because you have a complementary perspective rather than the same perspective.
Completely agree. Yeah. And you're always teaching me new things and like challenging me with different ideas and stuff like that. So, and also we have different, we've talked about this before, but like, I think we have different backgrounds. Like, you talk about how you were this like straight A student, really academic. And I like at one point didn't know if I was going to graduate high school. Like seriously, it was a point of stress because I was like in just such a turmoil place in my life that like I was just, yeah, we completely, in those, there's just these little things about our personalities that are
Yeah.
pretty different, but also, and then also there's this rich middle ground where we share, I think, a lot of the
Mm,
same values.
yeah.
Yeah. And so all
Yeah.
of that, I think, makes this fun and
Yeah.
enjoyable.
Yes. I agree. I
Yeah.
very much agree. Yeah. So then we talked on the phone, which is also like a novel thing because we're both geriatric millennials. So who the fuck talks on the phone? And
That's how you know you're excited about something.
exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then we just started like recruiting guests and recording things. We like got our little bank of episodes, and I don't know, I never thought this far ahead. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I
Yeah.
didn't, yeah,
Okay,
I don't.
wait, sorry. I just stop you there though, because you're like, and
Mhm.
then we just like started recording episodes, but in between all of that, let's, dear listeners, I want you to know there was a lot of like, wait, how do we do this?
Mm,
I don't
mhm.
know, like what kind of microphone do we need to buy? Like, do we need special recording technology? Like, it was a lot of like, I don't know. And literally, the
Yeah.
step one was, hey, let's research. And I was like,
Yes.
you research these three things, I'll research these three things, and then we're gonna come back and be like, okay, what do you do next? And I would say for the most part, or I don't know if it's just because I've done it, because people have actually said to me before, like, I don't know how you started this podcast, I don't know how you did it. And
Mm.
I'm like, actually it's not like that hard. And I guess maybe that's easier for me to say now because I'm over the hump.
Right.
Everything
Because now we
always just
have like a
seems,
system, right?
yeah.
Like we use Zoom to record. We have a standing, this is my favorite little hack of ours. We have a standing date every week in which we
Mm-hmm.
record the podcast. So when we invite guests, we don't have to send 1,000 emails of like scheduling time. It's like Mondays at 8:30. Are you in?
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
totally.
we have, I think, figured out some logistic things to like
That make it work. Yeah.
streamline the
Yeah.
process.
But and that was some of that was like trial and error. But I think the point that I want to make is it's always going to seem harder than it is in the beginning. And it's going to seem overwhelming in the beginning because it's always hard when you've never done something before.
Yeah.
So again, I say this to people because part of my intention for this podcast is to provide context, inspiration, momentum for starting the thing
Yeah.
that you want to start. And it's like, step one is just research.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, um,
And we've had a
I
bunch of
was
ideas that we've started and haven't and have thrown out the door, by
right.
the way. Yeah.
Of course. Yes. And I want to speak to, so I love what you're saying, which is like sometimes you have an idea and the how feels overwhelming, which is just like start where you are and start figuring out some of the pieces of the how. And then also like put some things to the side, right? Like we're 100 episodes in and we're like, oh, I guess we'll finally do that YouTube thing, right? So like you can have some ideas that you don't have to figure out everything at once. But I also want to speak to like I was scared. Like I wouldn't even put my last name on the podcast in the beginning, right? Like
Yeah. This is the
I
part
was
I
like,
want to talk about, because this, I think, was a huge like capturing of transformation, which is really cool.
yeah. Yeah. If anyone is like I mean, yeah, the me who started this podcast 100 episodes ago literally wouldn't put her last name, didn't have her picture on her website. Like that's the context here of just feeling like I knew I wanted to come up and I knew I wanted to have a space where I could speak authentically. So I was like, well, I just want to put my last name on it, right? Because I knew I wasn't capable, especially because we're having these intimate conversations and I'm not capable. If like this cozy space has been made, I'm not going to be able to like
Hold
hold
back.
back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so I just found a different way to hide. And look at me now. I'm like a nut job who does all this weird mystical shit and has her face everywhere. Like the number of selfies on my phone is like ridiculous, right? Like because I
Okay.
use them for work.
Yes.
Like
I was so happy you talk about this, because this is the piece that I think where a lot of people get stuck. So the reasons, for context, also for people who don't know, the reason you were like afraid of, or at least to my understanding, okay, there's so much that goes into this. Part of the reason you're afraid to put your last name on things was because you were still in your corporate job. But
yeah.
I think for both of us, we had said this. We were like, why do we want to make this podcast? We got really clear about like our why and what's meaningful. And both of us were like, we want to talk about spirituality more, right? Because like this was such an important thing for us and we weren't doing that. And part of it was to fill a void and a need that I think we both had. Do you remember that? We were like,
yes,
we want to develop more spiritual community. We knew spirituality was important to us. And it's like, but how can we, and I completely give this podcast credit for helping me deepen my spiritual self, because now I get to talk about it every week.
yeah,
And it's become literally a non-issue. Whereas before, I think for both of us, there was a little bit of like, is this weird?
that's I'm remembering now. That's why I sent you that email, was because you'd been on my mind. But the reason you'd been on my mind is I was like, I know two people who are into like kind of weird spiritual shit. And one of them is Eva and one of them is Zaylee Kane, who was an early guest of ours.
Yeah.
And I emailed both of you, was like, hi, I think I might be losing my mind, but also it feels really good. So can we just talk about this?
Yes.
Because I felt, I was like going through this deep transformation and I felt really alone because I was afraid to talk about it. And I didn't have people in my immediate circle who were really interested in the same things. And so, there was this like kind of deep loneliness. And a big part of our why was like, let's have really authentic, kind of gritty and honest, vulnerable conversations about what it means to like be transformed, to be spiritual, to
spirituality in our everyday lives. Like that's where that comes from. The tagline comes from.
Yeah, like the lived experience of it, like the meat of it, right? Not just the idea, but like, what does it mean to be spiritual when you yell at your kids and feel like shit? Do you know what I mean? Like, and I feel really proud of us because I think that we've really stayed true to that intention.
Yeah. And I am like so passionate about this process because, and maybe it's because I work with people who struggle in this area. It's this idea of like, oh, I want to do this thing, but I am scared. And, so the message that I really want to impart is that like, once you start like, okay, so find your peeps, like that's really important. I say this all the fucking time, find your people. So you don't feel like a weirdo. And I'm not just talking about spirituality. I'm talking about like if you're into a certain kind of music, a weird sex kink, I don't know, like any interest that you have that's different from where you are now, because this isn't just going to apply to now. This is going to apply to all the way into your fucking 80, because you're going to continue to evolve and grow and outgrow where you are. You're going to continue to need to meet new people and like put
Yeah.
yourself out there and evolve and be uncomfortable. And so these steps are, I think, can be applied to like, you might be feeling good in your life right now, be like, yeah, everything's, and in 20 years, you're going to outgrow where you are now. And you're going to have to like do this thing that I'm talking
Yeah.
about, which is like, okay, wait, find the people so you don't feel alone. And then
Yeah.
you normalize it, and it
Yeah.
becomes, and then look at us now. That's I think what's so amazing is like, we've integrated this into our lives in such a deep way that now we have this huge community of people. We're no longer alone. It's a huge part of our lives to the degree that we don't think about it anymore. It's just who we are.
And like I went out to dinner the other night for my like best friend since we were in like 6th grade. It was her birthday. And so we went out to a couple of my friends from high school. And I talked about magic, and none of them are interested in that. Like they love me, right? But
Yeah.
none of them are interested in it. It's not their perspective. And me, honestly, probably even 6 months ago would have like talked about the business side. Like that's my trick, is like, oh, I'll just talk to you about like the business. That's, it's like my cover. That's my like Clark
Right.
Kent.
Right.
But like I just spoke without an effort to convince anyone that that I'm like right, because I don't fucking care, which is, again, it's a huge shift. And also without feeling like I needed to hide anything. It's just like, this is how I see the world, and this is what matters to me, and you matter to me, so I'm sharing it. And I credit the podcast, I mean, that more than any other thing, and like helping me find the space and like create the space to sort that shit out, you know?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess it's kind of like be true to what you love. Have the courage, I think, to like reach out to people about it, or find a way to build that kind of community. And then actually, like, I actually feel like the starting is the hardest part. Once you start, then you just like kind of get in a groove.
Yeah.
And then I almost want to say it happens organically, because we didn't like try, like we tried to make the effort, but we didn't try to be more spiritual. Like we were just living our lives.
Yes, I feel like there were a couple of conversations we had in the beginning that were really, really important. One is that we got super clear on our why. Like, why are we making this podcast, right? And our why was about like the space to talk, and the conversations, and like building something that felt beautiful and fun together. And then how we wanted to feel doing it, right? And so we talked about how we wanted it to feel like fun and effortless, and or easeful, maybe not effortless, but fun and easeful. And that to me is one of the things that's been really beautiful, because we've come back to that, right? Like we've had ideas, we've been like, oh, we should do X, Y, and Z to promote the podcast. And then one of us will be like, does this feel fun and easeful, or does this feel stressful? And we will like, is this the way we want to be engaging with this project? Or are we turning it into some like should obligation? And having established that we were on the same page about our why, which of course has evolved, right? Because now our why is also even more about our businesses as well. But like our why is always the A of our, like the primary why has always been
Like
to create something
cultivating
beautiful.
Yeah. And I think really to cultivate a spiritual space for other people, right? That's one thing that we said, is that like we want other people who are also on the journey to come and feel like they can have a space too, which is just very strange to me. That's still true, but is it just me, or has like the spiritual world really evolved a lot very quickly in the past year? Because now I'm like, oh, it seems like it's everywhere.
I mean, that's an interesting question. I feel like
or are we just more deeply ingrained in it?
I think, well, probably yes, and I think it's probably both, you know?
Yeah. Sorry, but I cut you off. So yeah, you were talking about your why.
But I just think giving ourselves permission. I remember once we were talking on the phone about the podcast, and I was like, okay, here's the thing. Here's my fear. My fear is like, what if we do this podcast and nobody listens? And I was really, because I could, before we started, I kind of did my thing that I do now all the time, which was like, what are the gremlins showing up? And the biggest gremlin for me was like, what if nobody shows up? What if nobody listens? What if we do all this effort and nobody's there? And So it just like spoke it to you, you know, for
Mm-hmm.
you to witness. And then we'd ask the question of like, okay, well, if we throw a party and nobody comes, is that okay? Do we still want to throw that party?
Mm-hmm.
I feel kind of teared up actually thinking
Mm-hmm.
about that moment. And the answer for both of us was like unequivocally, yeah. I don't
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, we want to be at that party, even if it's just the two of us and our solo cups talking about spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And that that's also something I think we've come back to a bunch of times, which
Mm-hmm.
is the reminder of like, we're like, our why is also like, because we're throwing a party for ourselves that we want other people to come to,
Mm-hmm.
but it is like something for ourselves. It's not, the invitation is for everybody, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not for everybody, as in like, I want to be the way you need me to be. Does
Mm-hmm.
that distinction make sense?
Yeah, I think what you're, yes, I'm really glad you brought this up because I think this has been like a principal tenet of like the heart, I think, of
Yeah.
the podcast of how we got started and how we continue to go is that like, um, yeah, you named the gremlin of like, what if no one shows up? And really that's just like what you're speaking to is the fear of failure.
Yeah.
That's what that is, like that we all go through whenever we start something. It's like, what if we, and I was kind of just like, okay, but I think it's like the question is, but what's your definition of success and failure? Because
Yeah.
it's like, if we started this podcast and even just recorded it, I would consider that a success. And that's why it was like, but you could, do you still want to throw the party? That's what I meant by like,
Yeah.
do you still want to come to the party? Because that's a successful party.
You're
Right.
right.
And I think, and it's like, um, and I think that's really helpful because it's, to me, it shows like, do you really want to do this enough? Because it has
Yeah.
to be for the right reasons. Because if you're, if you're like, if someone says like, okay, well, if you do this project and like no one shows up, do you still want to do it? And you're like, no, not really. That's okay. But it's just going to show you that you don't want it that bad. And then it just becomes, then you don't need to
Mm,
force yourself to do it because it might just be kind of a waste of time because you might just put in all this effort and you realize no one comes. And then you're like, I wasn't really that interested. So find the
yeah.
thing that like you would do, even if no one sees you doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, it's funny because I was actually talking about this with a client earlier today. Like, mm, it's okay to, I think the other invitation is like to consider what your definition of success and failure is, right? Because I think our knee jerk default definition of success is like, oh, well, lots of people will listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't even necessarily pause to consider that because it's just that stuff's just baked in. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think like that particular conversation, that moment when we talked this out was also just this opportunity for me to really look at like, oh, yeah, I had been defining success as people showing up. And do I want that definition? Oh no, there's another one that's available that I feel really good about.
Mm-hmm.
And just and to your point, that might not always be the case on the project, but in this case, it was like, yeah. And then all of you fucking showed up.
Yeah. Yeah. And because you can always cross that bridge when you get there. Like, I think for us, we would have been like, hey, let's just get out 10 episodes. And that would
Right.
have been a success to me. And then if we were disappointed that no one showed up, that would have been okay. And then we could have like crossed that bridge and be like, okay, now I'm really happy that we did these 10, but also I want people to come to this party. Like, it's also okay to be like, I want people to come to this party. And then
Right.
from there, we could have like had a new goal, which is like, let's throw the party and also try to get people to come in. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But you
Yes.
kind of like one thing at a time, which I think is so
Yeah.
helpful to not get overwhelmed, because
Mm.
overwhelm is, I feel like the number one, well, fear of failure and getting overwhelmed are like
And overwhelmed.
two big killers of
I think so.
dreams and passions and
Yeah.
goals. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like being willing, like trust that it will evolve. You know, like I think we're better. I think we ask better questions of our guests now, right? Like we think we've learned how to be more inquisitive interviewers. Like I remember once we had a conversation where we talked really explicitly about like, okay, what's the point if someone's like really like talking for a long time, right? Which like I fucking do, right? But like, what's the point in which you would interject a guest, and what's a way to do it that's really graceful, where they feel like warm and supported, but also
Right.
we're honoring our listeners who
Right.
maybe want, you know, the dialogue to shift
Yeah.
and and we hashed that out, right? And I think what we even like went and like read articles and like,
Totally.
I think that there have been ways that we have like, I don't know, just like learned cool new skills.
Yeah. Like out in the field, right? Because you
Yes.
can only learn that shit in the doing.
Yeah.
Like out, you got to be out in the field, like doing the damn thing. And I'm sure if we went back and listened to our first, just like everything else, like, and I'm sure people who like want to make stuff are tired of hearing this, but it's true. Like if I went back and listened to like our first couple episodes, I'd probably cringe a little bit because I'd be like, oh my God, like that was so embarrassing, or that was like what quote unquote bad or whatever. But as someone who's like interested in making a podcast, because I worked in the podcast world kind of for a while, and Ira Glass, who runs This American Life. Oh yeah, we both have we've had a history with This American Life, that we both were listening to This American Life on opposite ends of the world when we were both going through our own existential crises. Anyway,
also, as like the nerdiest human being, I have a massive crush on Ira Glass.
Oh, I have a huge, and I actually met him in person, or I went to go see him in person in New York, and I like got so nervous that I couldn't like go and talk to him. Like,
yeah,
huge. Like
I was once I was once in a movie theater. He was like they were doing This American Life like live event at this movie theater that has a stage. Anyway, I was in the movie theater and he like came and stood right like directly behind me, and my whole body was like, oh my fucking God.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know celebrities. I didn't fucking trip over someone who won an Oscar. Like, I don't know, but Ira Glass is sitting behind me and I'm like all hot and bothered.
Totally.
Anyway, okay,
I know, and it's hilarious because he's like but like I think that's evolved for me too, because I'm like 30 now and I don't know how old he is, but I think in my 20s I had like an inappropriate crush on him.
Yes, absolutely. I was in my 20s when this moment happened. Yes.
Yeah. But he says like you have to be willing to make back bad shit. You have to be willing to make things that are awful when you start, and I don't actually know if our beginning things were awful. I actually think that I adore us and that whatever
I think we're very charming.
Yes. But yeah, there is a little bit of
but the willingness to make something bad is important, right? Like I also am really proud of everything we've made. And also you're not free enough to make something really good unless you're willing to make something bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of, that's the thing we come back to all the time. Like you have to embrace it all.
Yeah, exactly. And just not be so hard on yourself, and maybe not even call it bad. Because I think a lot of people hear that and they're like, ugh, but does it have to be bad? I'm like, well, it's the willingness, but you don't, it's how hard you on yourself. Because I think a lot of people are really hard on themselves and like, well, it's not bad. It's just that's where you were at that time. Basically.
I also think too, I'm someone, as listeners know, who has a million ideas all the time. And I've always had a million ideas all the time, which means I always have a bunch of half finished projects, like even like crafting, like I've got like, half a blanket sewn and half a fox crocheted and, and so I had been interested in doing some kind of, because I'd always really loved podcasts. And I'd been really interested in doing some sort of like audio project for a long, long time. Like I was one time going to try to do this like family history, like, he was laughing and nodding. Yeah. I had like all these ideas. And I also had a story that was like, see, you never follow through on anything. That was like a big story for me for a long time. It's just like kind of the curse of being someone with a lot of ideas. You just burn through ideas a lot. But what I have come to realize is like those weren't the idea, like all of those were like practice for the things that I'm doing now, right? And like I didn't commit to the family legacy audio project, but like I fucking would move heaven and earth to do the podcast because this is the project that I was waiting for. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like, is it accurate to say like, you don't have to worry about all of that because when the right thing comes along, it'll stick?
Yes. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yes. So give yourself permission to like fucking let go of the things that you don't want to do anymore. If you are the kind of person who burns through a million ideas, it's just who you are. and trust that, like, when the right thing comes along, it will stick. And maybe get yourself a Capricorn partner.
Yeah, get someone who complements your skill set. Yeah. I think I don't know. I just think I'm very, I don't know. I have this idea that I'm very good at execution, but let's be real. I also started a gazillion things and do not start them. And also I'm actually realizing more, I think it's actually more accurate to say I'm really good at starting things and really not great at finishing things. Like, so maybe I guess we're saying the same thing, but I can be, pretty good at execution, but it's hard to execute. I think I've realized, like, just alone all the time. Like, it's so nice to do it with a partner. So I guess what I'm saying also is to other people, like, this was a really big learning moment for me, because I have this idea that, like, I like doing things this is a very Capricorn thing. Like, I like doing things by myself. Other people can't do it the way that I want it to be done. So, like, I got to do it, the whole perfectionist thing. And you're so good at coming in and being like, it doesn't have to be fucking perfect. Like, it can just be like, it's like simple, and like, let's just get it out. And that's so helpful for me to get it out of my brain and, like, perfect it to death. You know
That's
what I mean?
really, yeah. And I think that's the survival technique of someone who's like got, like, because I have so many ideas, like, the only way they get out of my head is if I just, like, let them be messy and incomplete and then, like, keep moving.
But if I were to do it my own, I would just kill it. I would kill it because I would just smother it to death. And or it's just nice to have a sounding board where I'm like,
does this matter? Is this, yeah,
exactly.
And I also think, I mean, I like, I joke about the Capricorn thing because I love all of my Capricorns. There are so many of you in my life. But I think the bigger thing is, this is just more fun in a partnership.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, is like, it's just more fun this way. So find yourself a partner that you really like working with. And be willing to be real with each other, because I think some of the moments that I actually cherish most in this project are moments when you have been like, hey, Caldwell, my feelings are hurt, or hey, Caldwell, like, we need to tweak the way we're doing things. I think those are the moments where I have most felt like this really profound sense of love, of like, oh, we're a good fucking team. Like, like, these are like, because you only have those kind of conversations with people who really matter. Oh, so I always think of those as like, like, kind of, I'm getting emotional, but like, that's like, those are the kind of things I talk about with, like, my husband. You know what I mean? Like, hey, this matters enough that I'm going to talk to you about, X, Y, or Z.
That's true. I guess that is true. Like, I guess I've never thought about that, because I feel like we were just so in it to begin with that I was like, of course I'm going to have this conversation with you, because I care about this podcast and I want it to fucking work. And if it's going to work, we're going to have these conversations. And I think I'm pretty good at that. But, what makes that work is that the fact that you would like you see that as, I think that speaks a lot to you, because you receive things well. And, for someone else, that could be a disaster. But like, you look at those moments and you're like, oh, this is a sign of depth and quality.
Yeah.
And that's a huge gift, where someone else might just be, I don't know, maybe offended or defensive, or.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I also get very defensive with my husband about a lot of stupid things. But and I mean, I think it goes, I said on, I think, our New Year's episode, how I think of integrity as like a word that I really associate with you. And I think that goes back to, like, of course you're good at those kind of conversations, because you're someone who's, like, always in integrity, or if you're not, it's important for you to be like, oh, something's off. I got to, like, integrity is my like mode of, my mode.
Yeah.
So
thanks, Kyley.
In some ways I think we're already answering this question, but I kind of want to ask you, what you feel like you have learned from doing this podcast and doing 100 episodes?
Ooh, I like this question. I don't have to, like, duh, of course this is going to be the question. And it's funny because I haven't prepared. So I'm just gonna like speak off the cuff. What have I? Oh my God. I have learned so much. Like it is insane. This in itself has been a transformational experience, like the podcast in many, many ways. Oh my God, what have I learned? We might have to take turns because I think like do you want to go first?
Well, I just want to point out there's kind of two tracks to the answer too, because there's like, what have we learned from doing this creative project together? And then there's also the what have you learned from like all of our fucking insane guests who have come and blown our minds, right? So it's like it has many arms, this question.
Yeah.
So we won't be able to actually answer it in completion.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. It's like, what have we learned working on the podcast and then working in it, which is like when we're actually like having the conversations. God, where do I even start? I like really feel like I need a moment to think about this. Wait, can we do a pause?
Yes, Jennifer, we're taking a time out.
Yeah, Jennifer. Sorry, I need to think. Okay.
I'm gonna pee while you think. I'm gonna pee and think at the same time.
Okay, I'm gonna pee and think too. Okay. Good. Hi. Okay. How do you feel about your answers? I
don't know. I asked the question and I still don't.
I have one thing that I can definitely share, and then I'm sure we'll like.
Yeah, that's kind of that's how I feel. You want to go first or want me to go first?
I don't care. Do you have a preference?
You go first.
Okay. All right, Jennifer, we're going to start again. Okay. I think actually it's so hard to answer this question because I think there's like, I learned something from every episode. So we could talk about like the individual lessons. I'm actually going to talk about not the micro, but the macro, as in zooming out. That has actually nothing to do with content and has everything to do with, I'm so grateful because I feel like I've learned how to express myself more comfortably. And I almost want to say, I feel like it's allowed me to practice becoming more articulate, but I actually think what has happened isn't that I've become more articulate. It's that I don't even know if I'm being articulate, but I am more comfortable just saying whatever I want to say without having to worry about if it is articulate. Do you know what I mean?
Do you want to know what my answer to this question was?
Yes.
So listeners, after I asked this question, Eve and I realized we needed to like think about it, and we like went and took a water break and came back. So this is Eva's answer. My answer is I have realized that it's really okay to just be myself and speak whatever it is that I want to speak without worrying if it's like good enough for the right thing to say. We were basically saying the same
I love
answer.
this though. Yeah. I didn't
know that was my answer.
Exactly. I didn't know that was my answer either. And also it says something that we both had the same experience. Both experience. Like, I mean, y'all, this is so fucking invaluable, right? Like if you want to learn, like, there was this thing I saw the other day on the internet that's like, everyone should have a podcast. And they're kind of talking about like, not because you need to like promote your business, but just because of the skill set that you can like develop. And I do think this is such a valuable gift to have been given because I don't know, or Kyley, you know this about me, but I do have this thing where I'm always like, does this make sense? Or are people going to get it? Or it's like, it's an insecurity of not that other people won't get it. It's an insecurity that I have of like, oh, I'm just not explaining it well enough, or I don't have the, I don't know, whatever wisdom to express this thing. And that's still there for sure in some ways, but it's also dropped off a lot.
Yeah. And my version of it, it's like the same concern, but my version of it is basically like, are people going to like me?
Yeah.
Right. It's like, pick me, like me, love me. And oh,
that's interesting. I think, sorry, I have to interrupt. For you, it's like, when people don't like me. I think for me, it's that like, are people going to like believe me? Like it's an integrity thing. Like, are people going to think I'm full of shit?
Which is so funny because I just said like 20 minutes ago that like integrity is like one of the keywords I'd give you. So it's a funny thing how we like worry about the things that are so like just who we are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know maybe we are the way, who knows, maybe we are the way that we are because we are so careful and thoughtful and mindful of those things. I don't know.
Yeah. Or like it's maybe because it's valuable to us. It's also, we seek to protect it anyways. But yeah, I just feel like that has been, I think, a really fun journey of transformation, is like from the me who, like I mean, I spoke pretty transparently and vulnerably on our very first episode. Like I, was really out in the open about postpartum depression. Right. So I've just found a real, like an increased ease in being who I am in this moment. And I think because I've shifted and evolved and transformed so much in the course of this podcast in particular, I feel a kind of safety in continuing to shift and change. And like letting it be okay that like, I mean, the episode we just released today was me, or was it anyways, we just released an episode that was me just being like, I don't know if anything's real and I'm really confused and I'm in this vulnerable place, and like, and I was so excited to share that, right? Like that just feels like a relief. It feels like space of like, oh, I don't have to be anything for anybody. I'm just gonna just fucking be me, and that will be it. It will be something.
Yeah. I agree. I think we both have said the same thing in a different way, but I think at the heart of it is like, it's allowed us to be more comfortable, be more us, and be more comfortable in our own skin, be more
Yeah.
embodied in who we are, which is, yeah,
And
a big deal. Oh,
and witnessing that when I'm not efforting at being interesting, I'm more interesting. Like if I'm not like trying to be good enough, it's better. And
yeah. Well, and I don't know if I ever told you this. I'm pretty sure I didn't, because I can remember feeling like I'm just going to keep this to myself. But when we first started this episode, so this podcast, I was the one doing the like audio editing. So I would have to like, and I was doing it way too carefully. Like now we're just like, whatever, it's kind of messy. Like, whatever, it can just go. But before I was like cutting out ums and ands. And anyway, so I would like listen to a lot of the podcasts, and I remember just like cringing and being like, I sound like an idiot, or, some judgment about myself. And I would feel insecure after the first couple of episodes, because I was like, I had that thing of like, is this making sense? Do I sound like a complete phony? And I worried about that. And then it just literally, I use the word like it just dropped off, because suddenly one day it was just gone.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
And I
that.
think, I think that's just time, practice, and then also not giving a shit.
And I think also there's something about like doing the thing, right? Like being in the space that's like vulnerable or uncomfortable, like being in your edge, like, and realizing that it's totally fine. You know? So having the podcast that you maybe aren't as articulate as you want to be, or like you fumble over your, like you meaning both of us, and like, and realizing that it's fine. And in fact, someone messages you to be like, wow, that really spoke to you. You're like, oh my God, I was worried that wasn't a good one, like
Totally. Yeah. I do want to share some other things that I think I've learned. I wrote down some notes. This is an interesting one. I think, how we started the podcast off being like, there's different sides to spirituality. And we had talked about how I remember even leaving you a Voxer message being like, well, I think there's like meditation. Do you remember this message? I was like, there's this meditation, and then there's mystical. And that even that was a revelation to us at the time, because we didn't have language yet for like, all of these different things. And this podcast is definitely, sometimes I'm honestly begrudgingly, and sometimes very like in a fun way, like dragged me into the mystical.
I really
Which is like, I love it. Like, I love it as in, I'm happy that I'm skeptical and cynical sometimes. And like I don't dislike that part about myself. But there's something fun for me about being like, I'm going to like really not trust this thing. But then my heart opens up to it, or there's like an awakening moment, or I soften, or we have a beautiful conversation, and I'm like, or one of our guests is just completely unapologetically out there. And I'm like, oh, I think I'm out there. This person's 10 times more out there, and they're living their best fucking life. So like,
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like moments like that.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to what I was saying in the beginning about like our practices being complementary. Like, I think it's boring just to listen to, I mean, not boring. That's not totally fair, but like I can just be out here saying like wackadoo shit all the time, but it's much more interesting to have someone come on and be like, oh, can you wait a minute? Like we talk about that, like, I don't know if I am on, you don't ever say I don't know if I'm on board, but you ask questions in a way that's, I think, much more interesting than it's, because it creates like a more like, layered, complicated flavor than, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. And also I want to be a voice for people out there who are also like, what, like, is this true? But it's so funny because we've come around full circle. I'm just now realizing in this moment that you provide for me now what I think I once provided for you, because you have told me before that I once played the role in your life of someone who was into spirituality when you didn't have that. And so you're like, oh, well, Eva seems normal and she believes in this stuff. Right?
Yes. Right? Yes, that was like when so if listeners don't, some listeners might not know, but we first connected because Eva was my coach, and you were helping me like develop a meditation practice, which, full confession, it's like 5 years later,
Yeah.
still don't have a regular practice. um and yeah, and one of the like real gifts was that it was like, oh yeah, here's this like totally normal woman who like also connects to her intuition. Okay, this might be a safe thing. Like I might not be like completely losing my mind right now as
Yeah.
I like go deeper into myself. That is funny. Yeah.
But here you are now fucking talking to trees and like, I'm trying to think whatever like awesome and hilarious story. Oh, having mushroomless psychedelic trips, like having psychedelic trips without taking any type of psychedelic, like these things. Like, I love it when you talk about magic. You fucking have just gone like, full in, full out or whatever. And now that's what I love about you. I'm like, I totally trust Kyley. Like Kyley is, it's not even about trust, but you're a fully functioning person. You take care of 2 kids. You are as far as your human goes, your 3D version is like, I don't even know, you're just 100% real, legit. I can trust you. You're reasonable, but also Kyley's normal and she believes in all this stuff. You know what I mean? So now you're playing that role for me where I'm like,
that's really funny.
Yeah.
Well, that's also funny because I had a realization the other day that, I had my like, wait a minute, is anything real kind of moment, which if you guys haven't listened to, it is I mean, I'm biased because my brain was broken. I'll put me back together. So I really like that episode. But I had the realization that like, I think for a long time, it felt really, really exciting to anchor into the realness of mysticism, like the realness of like, I got this little dragon on my like altar next to me, and like the realness of like, I have a dragon. Her name is Esme, and we fucking hang out when I need that kind of help, right? And that felt like really gorgeous. And now I'm in this space. It's the paradox. It's the yes and, right? It's like, yes, that is real. And also, it's not. And also, I'm real and I'm not. Anyway, I'm still playing with this idea. But I had the awareness of like, almost like popping through to the other side and feeling like more connected to what I would consider like your practice, because I feel like I'm holding less tightly to, this is, I don't know if this makes sense what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, I feel like what you're saying is important, and I think I need more elaboration.
I feel like maybe we should just ask Jennifer to cut that part out, because I don't know that I can elaborate in a way that makes any sense, because it's still only a half-baked idea.
Okay. Yeah, we can totally. All right, Jennifer. Hi again. I just don't remember where we left off. I was just saying,
I have to turn the heat on. The heat just shut off in my head. Okay. I'm getting cold.
Okay.
Okay, I'm really sorry.
It's okay.
I went on a tangent that I can't dig myself out of.
Okay. I just want to give her a clear place to start editing again. I think I was asking, I think you had, I said that you were playing this role for me.
Oh, yes.
And then, yeah, I think that's where we left off.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, we're making you do heavy lifting, Jennifer. We really love you. Okay. Yeah, that evolution, to being like just all in on the mystical, has been probably one of the most fun things that's happened in the course of this podcast. And the podcast has been a really important part of, because it's the place where I come and I'm like, oh, here's this cool new weird thing that happened. Let me share it, and let me again witness that it is safe to share like that, yeah, I was talking to my tree the other day, and my tree had something really beautiful and meaningful to say, you know, and that doesn't even seem remotely weird to me now.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, talking to trees, I think is a little bit, but like, you know,
But
yeah.
I remember when I shared that, it did feel like an edge, that it did feel like, this is kind of a weird thing that I'm going to share, but I love what Eva and I are creating, and I love the like community of our listeners, and so I want to share this. I want to share this, even though I'm a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
And so that, like, that's one of the ways in which this space has been so integral into me feeling a certain kind of like ownership of these experiences, because I experience them and then I speak them into existence again.
Yeah.
And I then receive the safety of having spoken them into existence.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's like an integration process.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, what else did I have on my list of things? I mean, okay, so there's also, I think, big takeaways that you and I have had from individual podcasts, like specific people, but I don't know if we want to get into that.
We'd never stop.
Yeah, we never. I would actually say, so Kyley and I, we have been meaning to do this forever, but we are going to come out with our like top 10 list, and we're going to send that out in an email of our top favorite episodes. So if you're not on our email list yet, jump on that in our Instagrams. You can sign up in my Instagram. Can you just sign up in your Instagram for your newsletter?
You can sign up on you could just DM me and I will figure it out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
If you go to my website, you can sign up for my mailing list.
Yeah. But I do think I'm excited about that email, because it's like a good place for people to like binge if they don't want to also listen to every single episode.
Or you're new. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So we won't talk about specific guests, because we'd never, ever stop.
Any other big learning moments?
It's so hard to answer because it's so big.
Yeah. Well, can I say that I do think that wait, hold on. Should we cut out that long ass
pause? Please.
Okay.
Cut out that long pause,
okay. Jennifer, sorry. Okay. I will say one thing, and maybe we touched on this already, that I'm very grateful for, is that I think we've accomplished our goal of we wanted to dive more into our own spiritual journey, create a space where we can like explore this stuff and also allow other people to explore. And I think I've just learned a lot about spirituality, period. Like that's what's been cool. And there's so many different flavors of it, right? Like no one, whatever, spirituality means so many things and also means nothing at the same time. But yeah, it's truly expanded, I think, my perspective, my worldview, my consciousness. Like sometimes we'll have a conversation like with Leah Garza. She's going to be coming back on the show. She breaks my brain.
I know.
Like just she'll, we'll ask we'll take like a simple thing that we just assume we don't even question, and she'll just like poke at it and be like, well, is that real? Is that true? And I'm just like, oh my God. And I love it. I love it.
Yeah. I know. And there have been so many of those moments where a guest says something and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
And I also think like witnessing the breadth of the way in which again, having started this podcast because I felt really alone in my spiritual transformation journey, now having this like rich tapestry of all of these people's stories of how they are also trying to just fucking figure out what the hell we're doing and how to enjoy it more, or how to be present more, or whatever, whatever it is, just feels so gorgeous. And I think creates a kind of permission I have found a kind of permission to just like be my version, rather than as someone who had really strong ideas, subconscious ideas that there's like a right way to do something and a wrong way to do something. I think witnessing all these people's stories and experiences has helped give me permission again to just be like, your path is your path, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, because there's people who come onto this podcast too who I don't necessarily agree with, or I'm just like, that's totally fine. You know what I mean? Like, but I like hearing people's perspectives.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And I think, you're right. I think there's also been something very affirming about, about hearing other people being themselves, people who are really into also what we're into.
Yeah.
There's something really affirming about that.
So, I want to ask about what does spirituality mean for you, but I want to ask a revised version of it, which is how has your answer to that question changed over 100 episodes? So we look at the question of like, what does spirituality mean for you? How is your answer different now than it was on episode 1?
Well, I can't remember what I said in episode 1. I mean, so that's totally fair. Do you remember what you said? Yeah, maybe we should have gone back and sorry, folks, we should have prepared.
I mean, I guess I could like speak to, I think I spoke a lot about how important presence was. And I have been for a long time, having grown up Catholic, but also reading a shitload of books about Buddhism. Like I have long held like presence as like the primary experience of spirituality. And I don't think I still think that's true, but I have just found a permission shown. I think the biggest difference for me, aside from being like a super fucking mystical weirdo who actually thinks nothing's real anymore, that's a pretty big change. And for the record, I am saying weirdo with like total love and reverence for myself. Like I'm not saying that word to like put myself down. Like I love this it's a thing that I like find great delight and joy in, that I am like, the flying the flag of being a weirdo. But I do think I had this idea that if you could like lock into being present in a particular way and in the right way, then you would have good experiences. And I don't think I knew that I had that idea, but that was really like a limit that was wrapped around how I saw spirituality 100 episodes ago. And I think I have a much like more expansive sense of permission now. That's like, well, if you want to be present, the easiest way to be present is probably just like fucking accept everything about yourself and everything, including the ways in which you're totally failing to be present. And even like meditation practice, like that was something that I felt like, well, I have to have a time every day that I meditate, like, and I felt like my inability to have a very ritualized practice was this huge hindrance in my ability to connect spiritually. And someday, maybe when I don't have kids, I will actually have a like ritualized practice. And also I have found that I don't fucking need it, right? That there are millions of other ways that I can be kind of intimately connected to myself and the universe.
There's no one right way.
There's no one right way. And so I can just follow the one that's giving me the most kind of joy and like nurturing in any given moment. And then I can just like keep picking new things.
Yeah, totally. I love that. Okay, so you're kind of helping me put into perspective, I think, my own change as well. But what I'm hearing you say is like, yeah, it went from maybe a limited thing and you didn't know that it was limited to much more expansive, but also having no boundaries, like no, it's not in any kind of container. It's just, right. And so I think I feel that way. So I don't know if you remember, but when Pilar Lesko, my old like mentor came onto this show and we asked her, what does spirituality mean to you? And how does it show up in your everyday life? She was like, I love and hate this question.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, fair, because it's not lost on me the irony of like trying to like there's some there's just ironic. There's something about trying to capture spirituality in an intellectual way that already sort of like takes us out of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like kind of what we were talking about in a previous episode is we try to make meaning out of it. And that in itself sort of just by default
strips some of the experience out of it. And experience is richer than meaning. Yeah.
So I want to, acknowledge that, but also the intellectual part of my brain, which I also love and appreciate. I think my answer now is, if I were to say, like, what does it mean to me? I think if I were to guess when we first answered this question 100 episodes ago, I think I probably would have given some long, like, answer that I wanted it to sound like profound or something. Cause it's like, oh, how do we even measure it and blah, blah. But I think to me now, I have more simple answer, which is I think that spirituality is just being a human. And to me, that's like, it's not this long, like it's not this long, like, like showy answer. It's like, it's there's something simple. I think what shifted is a simplicity. But also when I say like being a human, that has also changed for me, because to me now being a human means all the stuff in our physical world, like, paying taxes, washing dishes, things that we may consider mundane, and also things that we consider completely, special. But there's also, being a human means like you can have outer body experiences. It means that you can jump timelines. It means that you can channel. It means that you can speak to your guides. It means that you can be, have all of these like esoteric, mystical, trippy experiences, because that happens through like also being a human. So like the capacity of what a human can experience is literally unlimited. So when I say it's like being a human, I mean like it's not, I mean that in so many ways. Do you know what I mean? I don't just mean it's this practical thing. It's also what some people might consider completely impractical.
Okay. I am dying for the answer that I'm about to give to this question. We are like actually like the yin yang symbol right now in the best possible way, because my answer was, I was like, oh, I also have like a very simple sentence, which is spirituality to me is being limitless. And like, it is the journey of remembering that I am the fucking infinite creator of the universe, as are you. And also we're the fucking same thing. And also we're not real. Right. And spirituality for me is like the experience and process of and journey of like bumping into limits and then dissolving them, and playing with magic and remembering that I am limitless, and remembering all over, like remembering at deeper and deeper levels that like we are the infinite. And one of the most exquisite ways that we get to do that is by like really just like relishing what it means to be human. Right. Like, so the way like I talked in a previous episode about like living in devotion to the body, like really like being like physically here and like enjoying this like sensual experience of like my hands are on this desk and all, like that is an exquisite way of experiencing limitlessness. Right.
Yeah.
So we basically are like, I mean, I think this is like what we are co-creating in a nutshell, right? Is that like you are like holding the space of like being like spirituality is being human, and secretly being human has all the space for the mystical.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, spirituality is being limitless, and secretly being limitless is just being fucking human.
I love this. And as she was saying that, she did this yin yang thing, like the way that she explained it just so well. It is like a yin yang. Yeah. It's a paradox and a complementary and a both and.
As you were talking, I just was like, I wish people could see because if you're on our new YouTube channel, you can see my faces being like, oh my God.
Oh yeah, we're publishing to YouTube now, people. So if people want, some people have said, or some people say like that they enjoy watching. It's not really my thing, but some people have said they enjoy watching over listening. So
Yeah.
so
I will probably be wearing this red flannel shirt in like 70% of our episodes because it's what I wear at night.
This shirt is
So,
or some version of a cutoff shirt is usually often what I wear.
Yeah.
Cut off black shirt.
Fun. Well, okay, I love that. I feel like if we ever need to like sum up the podcast without like if so that was it right there.
This I have a completely unrelated question to this 100th episode. I want to know if you can, and you may not be able to do so in this podcast, so we can like put a pin in it and save it for another episode, but I want you to, can you explain to listeners what you mean when you say nothing is real? And I think we like kind of dived into that into the episode that's called Is Nothing Real.
Yeah.
But I feel like we didn't come to this. I feel like it wasn't solidified in a way that I think you're speaking about now.
I will not pretend that it is solidified now for the record.
Okay.
It is less and more solid at the same time. And my friend is coming on the show who will actually, I think, be better at holding space for this. In some ways, she speaks to it, I think, better than I do. So if you listen to that episode, it's me. For those of you who haven't listened, basically, my friend had a mystical experience, and then in speaking it to me, I don't know how to describe it, but I like received the knowing of what her experience was. And her experience was this like very, very trippy thing of like, oh, nothing's real and I am everything and I am nothing. Right. And when she spoke that to me, it was like I received in my body, like somehow some part of me remembered like, oh, that is true.
Yeah.
But I didn't get the experience of it. I just got the knowing.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a word for that. I just can't. It's like enmeshment or like something. She gave you like a transmission that just made you feel what she
and that's how I've like come to think of it as like an activation or like a transmission. And so it's been this really interesting journey for me because we recorded that episode before Christmas for context, and so it's been this really like interesting evolvement of like knowing this thing that's really uncomfortable. I would like to be real, like right, like and also like somehow having this like knowing that everything is not like that is a very small story, that we are real in the way that we think we are real. And it has not been comfortable. I will not even pretend that it's been comfortable. A turning point for me was I was washing the dishes and I was my friend Liz keeps just like, it's like also the placeholder. Like there was one time where I said something and she goes, it's really cute how you keep making humanity real. I was like, I fucking hate you.
That's pretty funny. And also I could see being very,
and so I was washing the dishes and I was like kind of sitting with this and it occurred to me that I was like, oh, this was like a big turning point. So I was like, my favorite thing a client has ever called me is Queen of Shadows. Like my favorite thing to do, my like shortcut to everything spiritual and personal transformation is like, what is the ickiest place? What is the place I least want to go? How can I allow myself to go there? Because that is always the shortcut, like, right. And that is like everything that I teach, everything that I have lived, like, where do I not want to go? That's where I have to go. And if I go there, I like pop out to the other side in this really profound way. So I was like, oh, I'm very invested in spiritual expansion. What is the ickiest part of spiritual expansion? That nothing's fucking real, right? Like, of course, oh, we're all one and everything is love. That's the comfortable part. That's the like light part. The dark part is nothing is real. We don't exist. Like if we're all one, that means like Kyley is not a real construct. It's just an illusion because Kyley and Eva are actually the same fucking thing, right? So all of a sudden I had this aha moment that I was like, oh, of course I would choose for myself to go to the ickiest place of spiritual expansion as a way to like,
Bust through it.
to bust through it,
Mm-hmm.
because that's how I do everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, fine. Nothing's real. Here we go. And I like, it like felt like jumping, like taking it. It felt like I'd been like on the edge of this pool being like, the water's cold. I really wanted a warm bath. And then I was like, okay, fine. Fucking cannonball. Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know that
Well,
and
how does it like show up in your life though?
yes. Um,
Mm. And I want to, I want to, and we can put a pin in this because I want to acknowledge that these questions are really hard to answer. Like I know that I've been in those headspaces before, usually after taking some type of psychedelic, and it's like, and I like, so clear to me, and I know it, but I can know something without knowing how to even describe it, or even I can know
yes,
something without understanding. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Because understanding feels really good, but it's not it always. It's not the totality
Yes.
of it. Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, so that's actually a perfect explanation, because I don't understand that nothing's real.
Mm-hmm.
And it's paradox, right? It's everything's real and nothing's real. And so like part of my like tenderness for the first probably like 6 weeks of me being like, I hate this. And part of that was also that I was like, I like have all these like pals that I hang out with when I meditate, and now you're telling me they're not real. And like, but that was because I was actually like, the idea that nothing's real, I was making more important than the fact that everything is real. It's both are true, right? So it's not like nothing's real and so we're in the space of nihilism. It's like yes and, right? Anyway. But I don't have the experience of it. I just have the knowing of it, which is again weird. So the way it shows up for me is like, when I'm in the space of understanding and like holding, how do I say this? When I drop deep enough to actually be able to feel into this new understanding, I feel like I have access to everything. Because if nothing is real the way we are clinging to it as being real, then everything's a playground that we get to create. Like, look at money, for example. That's obviously something I spend a lot of time working out. The reason money feels so complicated is because we think it's real. Right? But if money isn't real, then there's no difference between 50. I mean, there's a different, we experience it differently. But if we zoom out into the metaphysical, there's no difference between 50 cents and $100. So if we like can fall deep enough into non-attachment, nothing's real, I don't even need to be real, then all of a sudden we have this ability to be like, well, then I'm going to make $100. Oh,
Yeah.
well, then I'm going to just like heal this ancestral curse, or like, would you like I'm putting like air quotes around curse, right? Like we can just like, everything becomes possible when we realize that nothing is real the way we have been holding tight to it being real. Does that kind of answer your question?
Kind of, yeah. The way that I see it is like, or the image that I'm seeing is, okay, I don't know, this is gonna make any sense, but okay, I'm seeing like the universe, like outer space, or it just doesn't even have to be outer space, just a box, like hanging in air, and this box is a container that is also like a limitation for everything that we can access. And all of a sudden, I see this like rectangle hanging in space, and so what happens is like the walls of this container dissolve, and all of a sudden then you have access to everything.
Yes. I think
So
that's
the
beautiful.
the container isn't like a bad thing, but like, what if you didn't have to have these walls that keep you separate from from all that is?
And I think I think if we talked about this 3 months ago, I would have been like, oh, okay. So the objective, because of course, deeply human, there's got to be an objective, is to get to a place where you dissolve all the walls. Right now, I'm in the place of like, oh, I just get to see that everything is like a story. Everything is a story.
Yeah.
It seems like it's a limit, but I can tap into a part of me who knows that it's not really a limit. So human me experiences plenty of fucking limit, but I know that I have a place I can go where there's a part of me that knows that that limit is just an illusion, or that story is just a story. It's not the capital T truth. And so it's not like, oh, my job is to like walk around experiencing that my fingertips don't actually end or whatever, right? Or that like I need to be able to see that Eve and I are the same all the time, right? That doesn't feel like my intention, or like even what I'm trying to create for myself. It just feels more like something pops up and I can observe it with a kind of neutrality and be like, oh, that's just a story. Like, do I want that story?
And you can keep that story if you want to. That's the other thing. It's like you can be sovereign and say, I don't want to get rid of this one, or I like this one. And then some of them you can just literally just be like, bloop, like click them away.
Yes. And that has been like the most, exactly. And everything is, even the idea that we're infinite is a story, because actually experiencing being infinite has no fucking language, right? Like, so even saying nothing's real, everything's real, we're paradox, all of those are actually still story.
Yeah. That's the other paradox, is that in itself is also a story, that, and then it can expand even beyond that to which is why I think people say the intellectual mind cannot understand this. This is not something that you will be able to understand with your intellectual mind. It is something
that you experience.
Something else. Yeah. You experience. But yeah, that's what I call knowing. Like it's which is also funny, because we just did a whole episode that hasn't come out yet about how we know nothing. Like, what is knowing? Like, no, like, like, anyway, this is just getting, I feel like we're going in.
Well, we're doing a very Kyley and Eva thing, which is going on a like super philosophical tangent, right? Which I love.
But yeah, I'm reading this book. I think I sent you some pictures from it. It's called I Am That. And it is like just this. It's like 500 pages of him just like it's almost like my brain is confused. I don't say it's confused. It's more like it breaks my brain. And yet my body is saying, yes.
Yes. So the moment when I decided to just cannonball in was the moment where I was like, I'm just going to stop making this my brain's job to figure out.
I love that. Yeah. Stop trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Stop trying to make this something that you need to figure out. I love that.
Yeah. And I will say, like, the scope of the activation magic, whatever you want to call it, that I've been able to do with clients in this like now is like, holy fucking shit. I mean, like, it's hard to even put into words, but it's really, really different in a really profound way, because I myself am just like, there's just more that is available. So when I tune in to like hold space for a client, I get to go to that deeper place, and I can remember that I have a limitlessness, infinite flow of magic available. And so I can just shift fucking wild, super cool things in a way that is really humbling and cool.
Do you find that it's easier to do for your clients than it is for yourself?
Yes. what's different is I think for myself, it's more of the like, oh, I don't need that anymore. Blink. Oh, I don't need that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like that feels easier. Like, okay, for example, I had this aha moment the other day where I realized, uh, what is it? I'm curious actually for people to listen, and you can answer this too. What is a story? If you think of like one thing about yourself that you really like, fall back on, rely on, know to be true about yourself, and really like and value about yourself, what is
Mm-hmm.
that story? And when I answered that question, I was like, oh, that I can do hard things. I am like again, Queen of Shadows. Like, where's the scary, murky thing? I can go there. I can do hard things. I really love that about myself. It is like how I've been able to build this life, having had difficult experiences. Like,
Yeah.
I'm
But
not afraid of things.
it's still an ego. And I don't mean that in a bad way as in being but it's your identity.
Oh, yes, that for sure. But I wasn't even going to go down that road. What I was going to go down is that I am deeply invested in things being hard. If one of my core stories is I can do hard things, I'm going to constantly create for myself challenge because I am defining my value by my ability to do hard things. So I saw this and was like, oh, I don't want that anymore. And I love, and so I just could be in this like really like non-attached, like not, when I say non-attached, I mean like not clinging, but just like beautiful space of witnessing where I was like, I don't need that story anymore. That is a story that served me so well. And so I love it. And there was like grief. Like I felt like I was watching a part of me die. And then I literally like in my mind's eye, and all this happened in like 5 minutes while my husband was watching the football game, right? Like, because everything's sacred. So we don't need to make sacred space. And then I literally like closed my eyes and I watched her, this me who was like, I can do hard things. And I watched her cross her arms over her chest and then trust fall backwards into a fire.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
And I just like felt it soften. And then I was like, okay, I am creating a new reality for myself in which I'm not attached to things being hard. And I'm inviting in that new story effortlessly. So magic, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to meditate. I'm not going to journey. I'm not going to
right.
Like
you don't have
do
to
the hard thing to unlearn that things have to do, unlearn hard things. And then the whole next day, it was like, I can't even explain it, but I just felt like I was molting all day. Like things, I could just like feel these like shifts moving through my body. And I just felt different at the end of the day.
Yeah. I love this story. I have so many thoughts about this. The last piece that you shared was this idea of like, you don't, shedding the story that, okay, you know what, I'm not, okay. So it reminds me of the conversation that we actually had via, this was offline, the story of, I don't need to learn all my lessons to get what I want. Basically the end part of what you just said, you know what I'm talking about? How you're like, the old you who had the story of like, you can do hard things means that okay, that you have to do the meditation and the sacred practice work in order to like let this go. And it's a paradigm.
Yeah.
Paradigm shift. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which like I love doing, right? Like I still like, I find that like be deeply pleasurable to go on these journeys. And so it's not like I'm done with it, but like this particular thing, I was like, okay, I'm going to effortlessly shed it. So yeah, sorry, I interrupted you because I
think that's kind of like, I still haven't fully processed it. So some context, folks. Last week, Kyley helped me sort of work through this thing where I was like, I love the story of, actually, it's very similar to your story of like being the Queen of Shadows. It's like it's the same thing. It's saying like similar anyway, this idea of, do something challenging. It's going to show you where all your like limitations are, where all your work is. And then like you learn your lessons and you get to come out on the other side liberated and transformed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm very attached to the story of, show me my lessons so that I can finally be free, or if I can finally get what I want and like have my needs be met. And it was a real fuck you moment to like God and source or whatever, to be like, or to the story to be like, what if I can just have what I want now? I don't need to punish myself through learning all these lessons, except I will say part of me likes this story. So I can keep it if I want and say, but I like learning lessons. But then at least it's a choice. It's a sovereign
Yes.
choice where it's awareness is involved, conscientiousness is involved. You're not a victim to the circumstance. But that is, I think, so to it seems maybe very simple, but it was very like an aha moment to me of like, because I'm so attached to this idea of walk through the fire, and then you will like be
Right.
reborn essentially.
Because that's what we've done with our lives. That's been the story of our lives in so many
Right.
ways, each
Well,
one
it's
of
also the
us.
story of personal development. It's a
Yeah.
story of spirituality. How about that? It's a story. This is why I was trying to say, like, we had to go last week, so like we didn't, and this is all offline, but it's a story of spirituality. Is that right? Like, it's the story of coaching. It's the story of I don't even know. I don't think the Buddha
Is
taught this,
that
but
I mean, is that what we're breaking, right? Is this idea of like, do we want our spirituality to
be
be
contingent. Be contingent. It's almost like a good bad story. Like, are you a good little
yeah,
boy or a good
yeah,
little girl or a bad little girl?
yeah.
There's a little bit of that, I think, sometimes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because I'm like really thinking about like kind of Christ redemption stories right now of like yeah, are you like are you yeah. I don't have really words because I'm just receiving.
So tell me if this, because I don't know if this is the same thing that you're talking about in terms of like limitlessness, but I wrote this Instagram post once, which felt profound to me at the time, but in reading back to it, I'm like, oh, maybe this is very obvious. But what I wrote was like, you are worthy and deserving of anything that you want right now. Like now, you don't have to work for it, figure out your lesson, go into your shadow side,
Mm,
uh, all the stuff in personal development or even spirituality to like finally get what you want. Like, what if you could have it now? And then colonialism says, no, 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 you can't do that because you need to earn it and deserve it and have walked through the fire. And there's something indulgent and selfish and
mm,
egotistical about being like, oh, I just want it. Like,
no.
why can't I just deserve to have it now?
I was talking in a mastermind earlier this week. I like did a little guest appearance and I was exactly talking about that as I was like, do the journey if it's like rewarding and fun, but also like you don't I was like, look at how many shitty people have shitloads of money. Like you don't have to be good to have the thing that you want. Like it's not required. Go on the journey of like to liberation because you enjoy it, not because you have to cross some invisible threshold to be good enough.
Yeah.
And even in all transparency, even as I say that, I can feel physical resistance that's like, fuck that. No, we need
Mm-hmm.
the steps. We need to do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like we need to figure out how to be good, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even as I'm someone who's like deeply invested in like tearing apart exactly this story, I can feel in my body this like attachment to it. It's
Yeah.
really
Yeah. It's
pervasive.
a mind fuck. It's a real
Yeah.
mind fuck. And also it's both and because it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's because I think it's subjective. I think it depends. Like, okay, I don't know, whatever. So, but I think it does go back to the story of like doing something with an agenda or
Mm-hmm.
like I think that's the message that I'm worried that I am like touting because that's not the message that I want to send is like this idea of, how with like productivity, it's like rest. My old story of productivity was like, let me rest so that I can be more productive.
Right.
Rest is valuable. Self-care is valuable because it actually sets me up to be even more productive and successful. Whereas you can get to a place where you're just fucking rest because you want to. Like, you don't need a reason. You don't need to deserve it. Do whatever the fuck you want. Doesn't matter. And it's kind of like that. It's like, I think there's a story like, do your spiritual work so that you
Mm-hmm.
can get this thing that your soul desires most, whether it's like freedom or love or success or whatever. But I think in the wrong hands, explained in the wrong way, it can come across as you're doing that with an agenda because you're like, well, I have to do that in order to finally get that thing. And I think that can be a little bit toxic.
I'm thinking in this moment, I'm just playing with an idea, but I'm thinking about like bridge stories, right? Like sometimes okay, so I said a second ago, I did this like kind of moment of release, this moment of spiritual connection while my husband was watching football and I was sitting on the couch, right? Because I was like, sacred space isn't real. Like you can
Well,
just
it's all happening in here.
exactly right. The sacred space is wherever I decide it is,
Yeah.
right? And so you don't have to do all the ritual. And like if you are new to the practice, make sacred space, right? Like I don't use a prayer to open the records. I think the records are like a portal to that infinite. And also like I have a prayer on my website that I received that I share because when you're starting, you benefit from a focal point, right? So like if you have stories that help you, let them help you until they don't serve you anymore.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
So if the story of like, doing mindfulness because, or like, I don't want to say this, the story of like being spiritual to achieve like a certain kind of state draws you in, that's okay. But then at a certain point, like we could retire that story to be like, oh, right, I already am that state. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
100%. And I think this is, yes. And I think this is something I'm like very, that I feel very passionate about and talk about a lot, because mostly out of compassion for myself, because I see my brain go into black and white thinking. And I love, like you said, I love the steps, and it's like a trap for me. So I can easily get trapped in that. So I need to remember to like loosen and get out of that trap. But that's why I said it's subjective, because it depends on where you are, what you need, each person, what your lesson, like it's not a one size fits all ever. And so sometimes those things will be sometimes the thing that you may exactly need at the moment, which would be perfect for you, would be completely wrong for someone else, or completely wrong or really toxic for you 5 years down the line. But I do think there is an evolution. Like I think what you're speaking to is like, we have these tools and techniques and even stories that we hang on to, that because that's just where we are, and that's really helpful in that moment. And then you can evolve, I think, past it.
And which is why I think it's just useful to like hold gently our stories and not be precious about any of them, because they're all made up. They're all limit. Any story that we have is inherently has limit attached to it because it's a story. And so like let them exist, because I don't think we know how to human without stories, but hold them gently rather than cling to them as like, this is the truth, this is the way, this is the only option. Because you hold them gently, you can see like, oh, this story about doing hard things was beautiful, thank you. Also, I don't need you anymore, and I can create for myself a new story. But we have to like hold gently our existing stories to be able to do that.
And I have two thoughts coming up. One is, how do you know if something's a story? And everything is, but I think, but what I'm saying is, you don't know that if you are unconscious. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you could say that we could easily go and say on this podcast, everything is a story, guys. But for sure, we are all living in a story that we don't even know that we are living in, because that's how unconscious it is. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, again, we've talked about this fish who doesn't know it's swimming in water, even though it's all around him, because he just doesn't know what it is and can't see it. Like everything is a story. But if it's a really deep one, you might not know to question that one. But I will say, I think a good place to start is anything that you are attached to, anything that either Yeah. Anything that you're really attached to, or that brings up some strong emotion to you, positive or negative, I think are the stories that you have access to begin holding lightly.
Yeah. And mm, like I'm a mom of 2 little kids. Like I am deeply attached to the story that like my kids are real for one, but also like I am deeply attached to the story of like my relationship with them, who I need to be for them. Like it's probably the murkiest place, right? Like if I'm transparent, like if there's a place that is like where story gets like, oh, I have a lot of clinging, it is like I can't be a fucking bad mom, right? Um, and so there's definitely a lot of either unconscious stories or stories that I'm like don't want to poke at, because the consequence of poking at those stories is that my kids could be like end up with a shittier mom, right?
Or
And
that's a perceived fear.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas like if the stake, like me poking at a story around money at this point, I'm like, oh great, like only interesting things happen when I poke at money stories, right? Versus like poking at my stories about being about motherhood is like the story is like, oh no, I could hurt my children. Where was I going with that? Because I could like become more selfish or whatever.
Yeah.
So I have lots of unpacked stories around motherhood. And I can at least acknowledge that to myself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't even know the nuance of all of them, but I don't know the nuance of any of them, because like when I say everything's a story, I mean like literally everything, because language itself is like if you see a sheep, it's an experience of like witnessing a sheep. It's fuzzy. It's like got some dirt on its fur. It's got like maybe a cute little face. It maybe smells like it is a whole rich experience. What I just spoke is not that rich experience. So language inherently is limit. Language inherently is confined because it is not experience. It like floats above the surface of experience. So as soon as we are using language, which we do as humans, it's like our primary thing. As soon as we are engaging in language, it's a story. As soon as we are engaging in story,
it's not it.
It's not it. It's hovering above the surface of it. And that's fine. It's just literally the only way we know how to exist.
Yeah.
And also but what that means is that everything is story, is limit.
Yeah. Like literally it's this is what I love. Like our very fragile understanding of the nature of reality in itself.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, makes me very uncomfortable. Like I say this and I'm like, I love this stuff, but also the reason I want to be like, what stories do I want to like, because I think I'm so attached to some stories that I won't even admit that they're stories, even though I know that they're stories, but I'm like, I can just feel like I'm very, 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 very attached to them. Like, God, I don't even know. Like,
okay, this is what I was starting to say about my kids and I got distracted. Like, I'm really attached to the story that I'm a good mom. I really fucking want to be a good mom, right? And so like, I do not have some like chill, non-attached relationship to being a good mom. There is a lot of clinging, like there's a lot of investment in that story. And also it is a story, right? Because it's not the experience of, right, the story of me being a good mother is the story of like measuring, of enoughness. It's a story that the story that I'm a good mother means that there's another person who's a bad mother. There's another me who's a bad mother. So as soon as I'm invested in being a good mother, it means I'm acknowledging this possibility in which I'm actually not a good mother. And so the story itself actually, like my attachment to that story creates the very experience of me being afraid that I'm not a good mother, right?
Yes. Creates these limits, creates yeah, more stories.
Yeah.
I
And like
completely.
real pain that like, well, I'm so invested in being a good mother. It creates for me these repeating like fears and worries that I'm not a good mother. If I could detach from the story that my kids need me to be a good mother and I have to be a good mother and that there even is a thing that called a good mother, if I could unhook from that, I could actually experience motherhood with ease and patience and joy, I imagine,
Mhm,
with a greater
mhm.
capacity. And also, I don't want to detach from that because I fucking care about being a good
Right,
mother.
right. Or
Right.
what we're so afraid is if we do detach from it, we think that we're not gonna. That's like
Yes.
this is where the fucking paradox is thinking that there is such a thing as a good mother, that you want to be a good mother, is actually the thing that makes you a like separates you or creates a greater story of what a bad mother is.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, by like the very thing that we want, which is just to be, is, which would actually, I think, the paradox possibly actually then help you come into being a good mother, meaning just to be isness. I'm trying to kind of lose my train of thought, but it's this idea of like, we're afraid that if we let go of it, it's actually going to give us our biggest fear, but we already have it by being attached to it.
Yes. It's like we think that this, like my attachment to the story of good mother, being a good mother, is almost like, it's almost like that's the police officer that lives in my head. That's like, don't break the rules. So that's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's almost like the story is the thing keeping us all safe from
Mm-hmm.
me being like falling off the rails
Yeah.
and being the bad
Yeah.
mother.
You
But,
think it's keeping you safe. Yeah.
but it's actually the thing that's creating the pain of separation from being
Mm-hmm.
mother in its
Mm-hmm.
entirety.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it, my attachment to being a good mother is the thing that like causes like is like if I snap at my kids, sometimes it's because I'm like, look at how good I've been all day and you're not grateful and now I'm exhausted and drained, right? Like my
Mm-hmm.
attachment to the good mother also creates the very like my
Mm-hmm.
backfire
Yep.
that
Yes.
causes me to be a
Oh
quote
my
unquote
God,
bad
Kyley.
mother.
This is like, I'm gonna have to go and examine some fucking stories right now for sure. Cause like I can just see how these stories, well, first of all, I need to identify my stories. Everything is a story, but I need to identify the ones that I think are causing the I'm sure there's some top 10 hits is what I'm saying. Like the top 10, like top 10 stories that are just on repeat all the time.
Yes. Well, you say it really well where you'll say where they're suffering, that's where the story is.
Yeah.
So where
Yeah.
are the places? That's why I know mine's about mother, because I don't have a loop running through my head about whether or not I'm a good coach, right? So I have
Mm-hmm.
unpacked a lot of those stories, but
Yeah.
I have loops around these other things. So,
Yeah.
that's my tell.
Yeah. Oh, this is so good. And also this idea of like, I've said it before. It's like we are the seams separate but the same. This idea of like, what did you say? You said if you let go of the idea, like you're attached to the story of being a good mother because you're afraid that if you let go of it, then you'll actually be a bad
Bad
mother.
mother.
That's what we are so afraid of. And I have
Mhm.
found time and time and time and time and time again. It's so interesting because we all want freedom. And then when we get close to it, we fucking pull back because it's too fucking scary.
Mm.
Basically, the idea of letting go of that story is actually the thing that's terrifying because we don't trust what would happen if we let go of that story and if we were completely free or isness itself. We can't trust that.
So this is the like gift of the nothing is real, because ultimately that's the very thing that we're afraid of. That's the bad mother, is that nothing is real,
Mm,
right? Like as in like it's the story we're most not interested in engaging with. So that's why when you slip into the place of like when I can like touch into the place where some part of me
mm-hmm.
understands that nothing is real and everything's real, then I can rise up from that place and be like, oh, that's a story zap, that's a story zap,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's like I went to the darkest, scariest place and was like,
And then you got free.
oh, it's actually okay here.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is always how it is. Which is like, being with what is.
Yeah.
Like that, like the scariest, even the scariest thing.
Like okay, so I had another experience where my friend took me on this like deep journey. Like she's a shaman. We went on this like crazy wild journey in which she basically took me to death, like to the like it was like you are the dirt. Okay, now, like you're in the dirt. Okay, now you are the dirt. Like worms are chomping around. And what I experienced in my body was exquisite joy. Like you think of how fucking terrified we all are of death, right? And in that moment of experiencing like a quasi, approximation, it just was like, oh, I'm like completely liberated and it's exquisite and I love it here. And then shame showed up and then I felt real miserable. But
no, but I hear you. I know exactly what you mean. It's like, yeah, we think it's the thing that we are most afraid of that we think is going to be so scary. And I think death is a perfect example of that, or nothingness is a perfect example of that. Is like when we can go and be with it, which is like what all this is, you actually find the truth.
Yeah.
The truth, which is it's not scary.
Yeah. The experience of, it's interesting. I'm thinking like death, nothingness, and badness are like probably the three things that we are like, don't go there, don't go there.
Well, to be honest, I never considered that nothingness is one of those core stories that like I'm sure that it is, because now I'm like, fuck, like that sounds, now that I have to go and question, is everything real, but yeah, I think on an intellectual level, I've always been like, yeah, like, yeah, but like, yeah, just because, psychedelic experiences have showed me that like, it's nothing. And I've been like, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But I think when you actually have to go in and examine all the little tiny pieces, it could be really terrifying.
Because you're just like, there's a lot that you have to let go of.
Yeah.
And when then you let go of them, something new comes in that's way better. Yeah. Which is what you call liberation.
Yeah. Or truth. Or, but what the fuck is truth? You know what I mean? Like,
I'm having a reaction to truth. I'm like, I don't know.
Well, because it's like, it's ultimate truth, which in itself is a paradox, because that word to me, when I say ultimate truth, it means it's the paradox of like, that could be nothing at all. Do you know what I mean? I don't even know how to explain it. It's like ultimate truth is just a phrase that I think you can use to say that nothing is true. That might be the ultimate truth.
The ultimate truth is like, there is no truth. Yeah. That I can get behind. Yeah. It's interesting. It was just interesting also just like witnessing my reaction to truth. And again, not making it right or wrong, right? I'm just like, oh, that's interesting. I'm having a reaction to truth. That's curious. I'll see where that goes. As opposed to like the me who's like, I gotta unpack. I'm just trying to do more of just like observing.
Or would you say, because I feel like I've been having this experience more of like letting things work on me or work in the background, which is like been really nice.
Can you say more about that? As I really resonate with it and I love it.
I mean, there's different ways of explaining it. I to me, because I'm much more cerebral, my explanation of it is my, I can say that it's a cerebral explanation, but I'm also like, but I also recognize that it could be happening in all these different ways, and this is just the way that I can understand it. But it does feel like I will have something come in that I want to like, that maybe I would, on one hand, I could try and work out this problem. And instead of working it out and like journaling about it or mentally obsessing over it, I'm just going to be like, hey, subconscious mind, like, I don't even necessarily say this. It's just kind of happening within me. I'll be like, hey, I'm just going to put this over here and you do your thing. And let me just like, and things will just start dropping in. And I invite things to start dropping in, little pieces of wisdom or understanding or something that I need to know. And then I'll somehow understand something more clearly without having worked on it. Meaning And I think it's the other way that I think about it is like, it's kind of happening in the etheric. It's like,
Mm.
it's, and which like, I'm like a subconscious, etheric, I don't know, are they the same thing? But like, that's kind of what I mean by like, you know, sometimes people talk about how, you know, ask your subconscious mind a question every night before you go to bed. So then like there's a quote that says never go to bed without asking your subconscious mind a question. But that could also be seen as asking your guides a question, asking like, you know, whatever source a question. And then you like wake up and you have some clarity around something. So that to me is like the way that I think the brain can understand it, because the people can get really behind the idea of like, oh, your subconscious mind is working on it. But I don't know if that's what it is. And I don't think it really matters.
I'm thinking about too, like the power of intention. Like what I'm hearing is like you set the intention that's like, okay, I'm going to like release this story, or I'm setting the intention to have a different experience, or like,
or setting the intention to get clarity around something,
or setting the intention to receive clarity, and then opening up space for your intention to like create itself.
Right. Or your intention, which you could call sets off of the emotion of energy, you know, like the energetics of something is just happening.
So this is like this kind of knowing that's dropped in, or this like, anyway, this thing that has like this particular phrase that showed up in a bunch of client sessions lately. When I do it, I call it the magic portion of, because I've kind of moved away from using the word healing, because it's like you're whole, so there's nothing to heal, we're just remembering. Anyway, I'm sure that language will shift in another 3 months, but I this idea that like time isn't real, right? Like time is just like stacked on top of each other, and we speak our intention, we speak our desire, we speak our like our wants, which sometimes are things we don't think we want, but we some part of us wants, right? So we speak our creation into existence, and in that moment it exists. And then everything that transpires between the moment of speaking and the moment that experiencing it is basically what our human self has chosen as the process of it unfolding. And so if our story, for example, my story of like, oh, like my story is that hard things are valuable, and I get a lot of satisfaction. I'm doing hard things. So I speak into existence, and then I experience 6 months later. And in that 6 months, maybe I have lots of challenges that I have to overcome, because I have chosen that as my particular like building blocks between point A and point B. But somebody else has a different ontology. Oh, we haven't learned that word yet. That's in the Leah Garza episode. Has a different set of like building blocks, and so they have a different experience. But the intention is the moment it already exists. Like the speaking into existence, it already exists, and then everything else is just the particular way in which we're choosing to experience it unfolding.
But so when you say we're choosing, like this is the way that we choose for it to unfold, do you mean like your soul? Because like, okay, what is even that? But like, are you
just gonna say what
like,
is even
soul? But like, who's this we that you were talking about? Like who's choosing that? Like this, you mean? Because I've heard someone say that before, and I don't know if that's what I'm saying. Like, it's so funny because I've heard that same thing someone has said, but the way that they explained it was this idea of like your soul, this is the soul, your soul is choosing to learn these lessons. And so that's why that's your ontology, because that's why that's what your path is, or I've even heard people say this is like your future self, and it's dropping in the pathway, and you have to like learn all these lessons in order to get there. I guess I'm curious to you, like, who is this you that you speak of?
Okay. So I'm saying, I'm trying to say something trippier, which is you are everything. Right? Okay, that's the other part of nothing is real, is that you're everything. Like you are me, you are the computer, you are the sun, you
Mhm.
are that black hole a million galaxies away. Like you are actually everything, because there is no all separation is
Mhm.
an illusion. So you are everything. I am everything. We are together everything, because
Mhm.
there is no actual separation, right? So there is no future self. There is no like, because that's also a false separation,
Right. Right.
right?
So I'm kind of curious to know, but you're saying something is like creating this
You,
pathway.
but you
Who?
are everything. So you, Eva, again, this is one of those things that's like, it's like this knowing that was rising up in me.
But you can't,
And also my brain is like, this doesn't make any
makes
fucking
sense. You can't
sense.
explain it. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So like, no, and it's like, it's almost, you know what it is actually, you know how like storms are formed when there's like a hot, like there's like heat rising and
Mhm.
cold air falling. That's like basically what's existing inside my body every day these days, right? So like my brain is like, this doesn't make sense, but then there's just this part of me that's like, oh, but this is
Yeah.
so that's cool that you
Mhm.
don't understand it, but also
Yeah.
this is.
But also
And
you don't have to
I'm
understand it.
and I'm just trying to like ride that
Mhm.
storm and let it be fun and playful instead
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah. Okay. Well, excuse me. I would like love to dive in this forever. I have a couple of things. Well, first of all, I have to go soon because Adam is cooking an amazing dinner. I told him that I would be
Mm.
done at a certain time and I can smell it. It smells amazing. And
Oh my God, what's he making? I want to go eat it.
he's making a duck dinner. But I also have a feeling we need to have a whole conversation about like maybe like my relationship with eating meat. That's like I feel like
Mm.
something that will need to be discussed at some point.
Okay.
But anyway, I'm being cooked for, so I should go soon. And we still have to do joy. But also, I want to put out there to the audience. I feel like Kyley and I have been having a lot of these sort of like trippy
Trippy.
conversations. I don't even know, like whatever. And yeah, I want to know like what if I want. First of all, I want to know like, do you guys like this? Do you want more of this, or are you guys like what the fuck are you talking about? Because I just feel like this is part of the journey that we're
I know.
headed
Even in our
towards.
episode,
So
we had an agenda in the beginning of this episode. We had like an actual plan, and
yeah.
we're like off there being like, "Oh, nothing's real. Casually, time is not real." You,
Yeah, and I forgot. Yeah, this is our 100th episode podcast, and we've completely strayed from that, which is totally fine because I feel like
very on brand.
yeah, but I also feel like we did a wonderful job honoring this
Yes.
creation and this process and this
Yes.
union of everything that's come together to make it possible. So, but anyway, yeah. So if you guys like this stuff, let us know. If you don't like this stuff, also let us know. I don't know if it would necessarily change anything, but we just want to know. Like,
We can spice it up though,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like if people are
yeah.
like,
Yeah, but also because we're gonna make 100 more episodes, so we want to know what you guys like.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And if there are ever like guests you want us to have on, or certain kind of questions you want us to answer, like
Yeah,
we love hearing, like really truly love hearing from you. So
yes,
let's just keep all making this all together, a big old team. Yes. Okay. So should we do joy?
yeah. Let's do a quick round of joy.
Okay. You want to go first?
Yes, hold on.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I know what my joy was. So we are recording this day after Lunar New Year, and I had the pleasure of getting on a Skype call with all my girlfriends from childhood, and not because of Lunar New Year, it just happened to fall on that. But I love if any of you are listening, homegirls from LA, I love you, and I feel so fucking fortunate to have like we don't get to talk that often like that anymore, but like we've been friends for 30 years. Like I've known these women, some of these women. Tiffany I've known her since I was in like third grade, and yeah, we've just been going strong, even though our lives, everyone gets busy. They all have kids and we diverge, yet there's still a lot of love and respect there, and it feels really special. So that brought me joy. That was last night. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I took my kids sledding.
Oh my God.
So we had a huge snowstorm here in New England, And I did not buy my kids sleds at Christmas, which I have since learned is like kind of the standard when you buy your kids sleds, apparently.
Mm.
I also did not buy them before the giant blizzard came and everyone bought the last remaining sleds. And my 5-year-old was like so excited. She kept talking about sledding all the time. And I was like, oh my God, I have to figure out this problem.
Yeah.
And there was like no sleds anywhere. And so I was like, get in the car. We're going to go on a mission. It's really driving the car. And I called REI. I love this. This is like a really great synchronistic moment. I called REI and I was like, do you have any sleds? And the guy was like, I have one left.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put your name on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'll be there in 15 minutes. And I get there and he says, 10 minutes before you called, someone came in and asked if we had any sleds. And I said, no. And we weren't going to get any more. And 5 minutes before you came in, someone pulled the last sled off of a truck.
Oh no.
And it, no, like they were unloading the truck.
Yeah.
Of like full of
new sleds.
New
Wait,
sleds. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So like 10 minutes before we were there, someone came to buy the last sled, but it wasn't available. But
Got
5 minutes before I called, someone like who worked there was like, oh, hey, I found one more sled.
Oh my God.
And it was ours. And I literally think it was the only sled in like a 30-mile radius.
Wow.
So I took them sledding today and they were just like, oh my God, like just in hysterics. They kept falling over. And I thought that Birdie would be upset, but she thought it was fucking great. We made a friend and like they sled with us. And it was just like, when your kids are really little, there's all these things you can't do because they're like too little to get it. And it was like this really, really fun moment of like, oh my God, we're all just fucking rolling around the snow and sledding together and like dying laughing. And it was really, really fun.
Oh, I love that. Also, sledding is just the best. It's like such a fun, important childhood memory. Okay. Yeah. I know that I'm the one who needs to go, but I actually do have to share this other thing too, because you talked about synchronicities. I just have to share this because it was like so mind blowing. Last night, Adam and I were going to watch some Cheer. I'm like obsessed with the show Cheer in bed on his laptop. And then we were like, you know what? We don't want to, let's go on the couch. Like it's more comfortable. So he's like about to leave. And I was like, grab your laptop just in case. And he was like, okay, why? He's like, I don't know. What if you like come back later with your water bottle and like spill water on it? Cause he always has this big water bottle and he's always dropping things. Anyway. And then he's like, oh, okay, sure. Takes his laptop. He puts like on the floor. Anyway, of course, later that night, he comes to bed, drops his fucking water bottle all over the floor, right? Exactly where his computer was. And I was like, that is bananas. Like
that is bananas.
Look, just the fact, I don't know. It was just like, just so like the heartache that saved us. Cause if he had like spilled water and destroyed his computer, like at 12, in the middle of the night, that would just been such a pain in the ass. So I was just like, that was amazing.
Love that.
Yeah. Okay. Happy 100th
dinner. Happy 100 episodes.
I love you so much. I love you all for listening. It really,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It means the world to us.
Yeah. Really, really, really thank you. I love you all. I love you, Eva.